Well, thanks everyone for joining. It's great to see attendees start to file into your to the one of the last breakout sessions of the summit. So thanks, and I'm sure many of you enjoyed the summit throughout the week. So thank you for joining us. My name is Amy Hart, and I am a senior policy director and regulatory attorney for Sunrun, and a proud member of Renew Wisconsin. I am honored to be moderating today's panel, which is distributed generation in Wisconsin, residential and commercial solar installations, and opportunities to grow the market. The Renew Summit and our panel discussions, first and foremost, would not be possible without the generous support of all of our sponsors. So at this time, I would like to thank Madison College for sponsoring this panel today. And with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Ken Walls, who I know many of you have heard earlier, and I love having Ken on to be able to talk to us. So I want to turn it over to Ken to talk a little bit about Madison College and the great work that they do in the clean energy space. So Ken, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Amy. It's a pleasure to be part of the session and to be able to kick things off for a discussion on distributed solar. The college is proud to be home to the largest rooftop solar array in the state of Wisconsin. You see a portion of it here behind me. But rather than talk a whole bunch about the school itself, I wanted to talk a little bit more in a broader context about distributed solar, and maybe share just a few slides and a few remarks on that topic to kind of frame the context of the conversation. Let me just share my screen here so that folks can see. The first thing I wanted to mention was this new study by the World Resources Institute that looked at the progress we've made over the last decade on addressing climate change and forecasting out through 2030 and 2050. And this is really just one of several studies that have been done recently. I have a few links there for similar studies done by Princeton and C2ES and McKinsey. And really, no matter whose study you look at, they're all kind of converging on the same general findings, which that if we're going to try and limit the adverse impacts of global warming, we have to try and keep the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees C. And in order to do that, we need to increase the growth rate of renewable energy by a factor of 3.5 to 5 times to try and hit a target of 90% renewable electricity by 2030. That is a pretty incredible target to hit, and a pretty challenging growth rate for us to try and achieve if we're going to try and meet those targets. Now, I will say that I am encouraged by the things that we've seen over the last couple of years with a lot of community action, whether it be local municipalities or school boards that have made resolutions to transition to clean energy. And if you think about those types of initiatives, distributed solar is going to be right at the heart of that. And I thought it would be worthwhile just to, kind of get an appreciation for what the magnitude of that might look like. In Wisconsin, there's about 500 police stations, about 700 fire stations, and about 800 high schools. So if you just think about those alone, that's 2,000 buildings. And if we had PV on each of those with an average size of 500 kilowatts, that works out to 1,000 megawatts of solar capacity if we just put solar on those 3 categories of buildings. That would be equal to the capacity of a large nuclear power plant. It would be 6 times bigger than the Two Creeks solar farm, the largest solar farm in Wisconsin today. And it would rival the amount of solar that Alliant Energy has pledged to construct. So there's no question in my mind that there's a huge role for distributed generation to play. The question is really, how can we unlock the potential there? And, if you're looking at school districts or municipalities, there's challenges there. How do they access the capital for those types of projects? Is there a way that we can bring private dollars into the public sector for those types of systems? Is there a way to, access federal tax credits for those institutions that otherwise are not taxable entities? And are there ways to look at, policies like net metering and rate structures to improve the financial viability for those types of projects? I know a lot of our neighboring states have looked at that. Some states have allowed a net meter up to their annual consumption, for example. Some states allow third-party financing, and I think those are all things that, if we looked at here in Wisconsin, there's a lot of untapped potential for growth. So lastly, I would just say at Madison College, we've been pursuing a initiative to put solar on all of our campuses and all of our buildings, but even more so, we want to serve as a model for others to replicate. So in the past year, we produced a Solar on Schools toolkit where we're willing to share our playbook with anybody else that's interested. We will share all of our RFPs, all of our financial models, and all of the lessons learned from the work at our campuses. And I'd invite anybody to check out the website createenergy.org to access those tools. So with that said, I'm really excited to hear from the panelists and get their perspectives on distributed energy and see how we can further accelerate this sector.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken. And thanks everyone for joining today. I know, Ken, there was already a request. If you can put some of the links that you shared in your presentation, if you can put that in the chat, that would be really helpful. So that's great. Thank you all for already finding the chat box and the Q&A box. That was sort of my first order of business, is during the discussion, feel free to use that at the bottom of your screen to engage in summit attendees. You can also ask panelists questions. I think a good portion of this panel today, we want to hear Q&A, questions, comments from all of you, and make this as much of a discussion as we can, given the format. So type in your questions at any point during the presentation, and then we'll make sure that we have time at the end and a good chunk of the presentation today. So we have a great panel, excuse me, this afternoon. And I am happy to be joined by two gentlemen that have been at the forefront of building our Wisconsin solar market, honestly leading the way with diverse types of installations and distributed generation in every corner of the state. Most importantly, these two have been really just great advocates for the entire industry for many, many years. And we'll just leave it at that. I feel like we've all known each other for a long time. And so it's great to have Josh and Jesse here today. But first, let me introduce the two of them, and then we'll let them talk a little bit about what they've seen in the marketplace with their business this year. Josh Stolzenburg is one of the founders of Northwind Solar, which is based in central Wisconsin. They provide solar and battery storage systems for homes and businesses. Northwind is a worker-owned cooperative and was selected as 2020 Wisconsin Renewable Energy Business of the Year by Renew Wisconsin. So Josh, thank you for joining us today. And then I want to introduce Jesse quickly, which Jesse Michalski joins us from Eland Electric. Jesse has helped build their solar team at Eland for many years in Northeast Wisconsin. And actually Eland Electric, which has been around for decades, was the first electrical contractor in Wisconsin to become NABCEP certified. And so I think we've continued to see Eland Electric continue to lead the way in the renewable energy space. And I also want to thank Sam from Renew, who's running this show for the panel this afternoon. He's going to be sort of helping me put up survey questions as we go along and collect questions. So thank you, Sam, for getting us all coordinated this afternoon. So Josh, let me first go to you, and I want to pull up your slide as we showcase some of your installations. And if you can just tell us a little bit about how the distributed generation business is going, how things have maybe changed this year during the pandemic, and maybe how things have changed over the last couple of years. But would love to hear about how your business has grown and changed during this time. And thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate it. It's exciting to be here, and thanks to Renew for offering Northwind the Business of the Year award. It's incredibly humbling, and we're honored to receive it. We're a smaller solar contractor in central Wisconsin. We employ about 23 people, and we're growing. We serve homeowners, businesses, local governments, schools, and hospitals in the middle part of the state, doing installations of up to, say, 500 kilowatts. At least that's where we're sort of living today. And we've recently built a new facility in Amherst, Wisconsin, where we demonstrate a bunch of solar and storage and EV technologies and some other renewables that are maybe currently out of fashion, but we think they'll come back in the future. You can see our new facility in the slide there. As far as how it went this year for us, I mean, just like everyone, we were very disrupted in the spring from the pandemic and trying to figure out how to accommodate safety for our customers and our crew and the logistics around that. and all of the downtime for individuals with family needs. I think this was probably a common thing for a lot of contractors, including the solar industry, but trying to keep people apart as much as possible, people on the same crews, so there's limited exposure, staggered start times, driving separate vehicles, minimizing customer interaction. So there's a lot of like logistical juggling to deal with that was new and took a lot of attention this year. And we saw a pretty abrupt downturn in our commercial market, at least in central Wisconsin, where businesses really were wary to lay out large sums of money to invest in projects just because of the uncertainty of the situation. So that was probably down about 60 to 70% this year. But the residential market made up for that in a lot of ways because a lot of people doing home renovations. So it was a very different year. I'll say that. I'm sure everybody had that experience. But yeah,
Excellent.
that's Northwind.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh. And we'll get into some specifics here too as we go along. But Jesse, let's pull up your slide and take a look at some of the installs, the various ones that you do as well. And so can you shed a light on how the interest has been in distributed generation, how this year has treated Eland, and maybe what you've learned over the last couple of years too here in Wisconsin?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Amy. Thanks for the introduction there. I'm Jesse Michalski, project manager with Eland Electric. I've been with Eland Electric since 2003. I am a NABCEP certified PV installer and also a Wisconsin licensed journeyman electrician. I served a 5-year apprenticeship program to become an electrician, and shortly after completing that, actually during my apprenticeship, Eland started to get involved in renewable energy installations, solar PV systems specifically. Rick Eland, our second generation owner at the time, was the first electrical contractor to obtain his NABCEP certification. Kind of worked underneath him for a while, and then shortly after completing my apprenticeship, moved into a project management role here at Eland Electric, overseeing initially all of our lighting retrofits, energy efficiency, energy conservation type of projects, and then design and install of our solar PV systems. And probably over the last 6 or 7 years, the solar has just grown to a point where that's about all I have time to focus on right now is our solar photovoltaic projects. This year was definitely an interesting year, as Josh alluded to. We saw a similar, I don't want to say downturn, but maybe reduced interest from the commercial sector, but definitely an increase from the residential sector with renewable energies, whether it's they were spending more time at home, realized the more time they spent at home, the bigger the electric bills were. I'm not sure, I think there's a lot of things we can point to that might attribute to the increase desire for residential homeowners to put in solar. But we've continued to see year after year continued growth, steady growth, as statewide and nationally the industry has grown as well. So it's good to see the growth. With the extension of the 2-year extension on the 26% tax credit, I think we will definitely continue to see that level of growth, and we're looking forward to it. We're ready to grow. We're capable of growing, and we're here to fit our customers' needs. We are located in northeastern Wisconsin, so a little bit east of Josh there, but we serve primarily northeast Wisconsin. But as Josh probably also knows, there's kind of a big area north of us that doesn't have a lot of providers up there. So we'll go as far as the work will take us and take care of our customers, keep them happy.
Excellent. Thank you too for being on the panel today. And thanks to those of you who have already put questions in the Q&A. Please feel free to continue to do that. Use the chat box as well. We'll get to some of those questions. First, I want Sam, if you can pull up our first poll question. I think one of the things that Josh and Jesse and I talked about is we want to get a better idea of who is joining us today. So as you put the poll up, it's kind of so we can gather what's your interest and what category describes yourself and your interest around this topic. Maybe you are a homeowner. I see that there's a couple of folks who have put in questions where they are a solar customer, maybe you're an advocate or government entity. This will just help us frame our questions and how technical to get or not to get. And we want to make sure that we are meeting your needs here as well. Although I feel like at the end of the summit, maybe we're all a little smarter on renewable energy after all of the panels. The first questions that we wanted to focus on today is looking at some questions related to topics that aren't always at the forefront when we're talking about, well, how can we advance and what are the issues facing rooftop solar distributed generation? But it's essential for every single project that an installer will work on. Great, thanks everybody for filling out the poll results. This is great. And that is the cost, the soft costs, what we call the soft costs of solar, the soft costs of distributed generation. And that is interconnection and permitting and inspection. And so maybe just to kick things off, there's a new effort by the state to update interconnection standards. That's been something that's, we've heard over the years that we'd like to have that happen. There's now a new process starting. Why, for both of you, why are these interconnection standards important in your day-to-day work? What do you hope will improve as a result? Feel free to give some examples, that you've run into in the day-to-day work. But it's one of those things that it's can be seen as technical, but can really be a game changer. So whoever wants to kick things off, maybe Jesse, would you like to start?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Amy. Improving interconnection standards, maybe we should view it as consolidating interconnection standards. Currently, the PSC has, I'll call them a set of guidelines. They're really just the bare bones, the minimum requirements. Wisconsin has, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but I know it's just over 100 different public and private utility companies. And each one of those utility companies gets to basically create their own rules, restrictions, requirements, and it can vary greatly from one to the next, to the point that sometimes the utility companies aren't even sure what they're supposed to do. Recently, as recent as this morning, had previously had a conversation with a utility rep about their interconnection procedures. System under 20 kW did not need a disconnect. Working with the developer architect on the project, and a different rep from the same utility company chimed in and said, yeah, you need a disconnect for that. So it was kind of like we had two different people from the same utility company. One said we need a disconnect and one said we don't. And what does that mean to the customer? That can have a big impact on the cost of the project. If we got to install an external disconnect, depending on the size of the system and the size of the disconnect and how easy that is to install, can have an impact. Different utilities have different metering requirements. We Energies, for example, requires a line side connection, which means we have to change out typically your entire electric service. We have to pull the meter socket off the side of your house and put in a dual socket meter pedestal. Other utilities don't require that. So getting to a consolidated effort and some sort of maybe a little bit deeper reaching guideline for interconnection standards will definitely make things easier, and I think more cost effective in the long run for the homeowners.
You talked about the cost, and maybe Josh, you can chime in as far as the impacts would be. There's the immediate sort of the cost to the customer, depending on what the requirements are, but it sounds like it's also a lot of staff time, and that goes into knowing what the guidelines are, what the rules are, or what the differences are.
Yeah, certainly keeping up on all the differences between the utilities, and then even within the utilities, as Jesse mentioned, you can have an engineer from one region of the state versus another that have different answers for you and what the requirements are, and staying on top of that. It takes staff time for sure, and it actually seems to change pretty quickly, especially as we get more into solar plus storage systems and the disconnects related to batteries. That has changed drastically over the last year, where where now utilities just used to require a external disconnect off of the solar's inverter. And now we're moving into not need, if there's a battery present, not needing a disconnect off of the solar inverter, but needing one off of the battery if it's AC coupled, as well as a whole home disconnect. So it's sort of strange. And hopefully we can get some consistency on that front through this process. I'll also note that how capacity is counted for net metering limits varies pretty significantly and isn't necessarily rational from my perspective. Some utilities use the DC capacity of the PV system as the basis. Others use the AC of the inverter for that basis. And then when you throw batteries in, some utilities count that capacity as generation capacity and can take you up past the net metering limits and reduce the value of the production of the system significantly, or require additional capacity on the utility side as far as a transformer goes. So that's really, you know, I think it's been hammered home, and we're adding to the chorus of what's been already said at this summit, is that we need consistency across the state on these interconnection standards, and timeliness in the application process and transparency in that process. I'll throw one in for you, Amy. It would be nice to see who owns the system be removed from consideration in what amounts to an engineering review.
It's a great, I'm writing it down as a suggestion. So you both are doing battery systems. It sounds like you've done a few or several, and it sounds like a lot of customers are starting to ask for that more. Question for you too is, would you want to see the solar plus batteries or the battery consideration part of the interconnection update, just given how long interconnection rules stay in place? I feel like things are moving pretty quickly in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, they're already part of the interconnection process. They should be standardized just like solar only systems, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely think the batteries should be incorporated into the interconnection, updated interconnection standards. We have enough time, we have enough experience, we have enough professional people on board that really can find a way. I think there's a way for both sides of that table to play well in the sandbox together and agree to meet in the middle on, how to provide clear and consistent mechanisms, policies and procedures in order for battery systems to be incorporated. Most of the time, at least in Wisconsin, with net metering, homeowners are putting in battery storage primarily for emergency backup use. It's not like other states where they're using it to reduce their peak demand or shift energy generation from the daytime to the nighttime. It's, at least in my experience, maybe it's different for Josh, but all the customers we've had that have put in battery storage, it's been for emergency backup power. And there should be no reason why that emergency backup power adds to the capacity of the system for purposes of net metering, because the utilities don't add the size of a generator. A whole home backup generator doesn't affect or even trigger any sort of net metering agreement. So I think that does need to be incorporated.
Excellent. And I saw a couple of questions came in on batteries, and since we're on that topic, this was like number 6 on my questions, but I think people would love to hear a little bit more about this. So if you two can just spend a minute kind of talking about what Jesse, maybe we'll go back to you, and then Josh, if you want to chime in, what you're seeing customers ask for, what kind of batteries you're using, and how people are using them. But really then to get to that second point of the question of how can we best leverage storage to be able to unlock all the benefits, right, that these systems have. And maybe get a little bit of details from you too, and then we can talk a little bit about other states examples and what we could do here. But Jesse, do you want to elaborate, both of you, on your storage experience?
Yeah, we've done a lot of off-grid systems, but we're seeing a bigger shift towards those utility interconnected grid-tied systems that want to add and incorporate energy storage. And in our experience, it has always been primarily been for emergency backup power, so that in the event of a power outage, for those joining the the session here today that don't know, your standard utility interactive inverter will shut off or turn off in the event of a power failure. Even if it's the middle of the day and the sun is shining, your solar system will not work during a grid failure. So batteries can be incorporated into that system to provide emergency backup power to the home, and the solar panels will also be able to keep a charge or recharge those batteries throughout the day. It basically becomes a renewable powered generator at that point in time. That's been our experience outside of the true and traditional off-grid systems where people are powering up their entire properties with battery power. We've run some financial calculations, at least for the utilities that we primarily work with, for customers that want to attempt to shift load from daytime to nighttime, or try to, get into an on-peak, off-peak type of rate structure. And I don't feel that it's beneficial to put in batteries, to shift cost from daytime to nighttime. I haven't been able to make that work on paper. Maybe I'm just not creative enough, but our experience has been emergency backup power with the batteries.
Yep, same for us. And there's a couple of situations where you can actually see a little bit of financial benefit where the primary purpose is the backup power. There are some co-ops that we work within their territory that have real-time export of solar generation that is valued lower than the retail rate. So if you can capture that by charging the battery during the day and then utilizing it at night, you can see like maybe a 6-cent delta in value there, which is not nothing, but it's not enough to drive a battery installation by itself, but it can augment that backup power use.
Well, that's what's interesting too, right? How do we, thinking about the customers that have come to you with the interest in wanting it for that backup, but being able to use that, not with that investment, or encourage the additional investment that can bring those benefits. I think we've seen in states, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this, of a two-prong approach, right? Where you provide the storage incentives to help address that upfront cost that drives adoption, but then storage programs or rate design like time of use, Jesse, like you said, that actually encourages that behavior. So a time of use rate design, or a bring your own device type program for performance of the batteries, like capacity or frequency, that type of thing. Have you two thought about, would that help be able to make the economics work? It sounds like being able to have those programs would be a benefit to your customers, or to increase customers, I should say.
I think there's ways in rate design and utility engagement that might make batteries more economical here, or at least make the financials, be a little bit more sensible here. We kind of joked about it before we opened up the panel here, but necessity is the mother of all invention. And really Tesla, kind of took advantage of that in California, where customers were not getting any credit for excess energy exported to the grid during the daytime. And in those situations, and here the delta, like for Adams Columbia Co-op, for instance, I think that's the one of the ones Josh might be referring to, where they have real-time export. There's a 6 cent per kilowatt hour delta between export and storing it in the battery. States like California, you might see a 15 or 20 cent delta between that energy. So that's what drives the economics of huge widespread residential battery storage, coupled with utilities just being able to at will shut off the grid for fear of fire. So there's a lot of other reasons why batteries are much more popular in other states. I don't know how we get that here. Some of that can be through rate design, different rate adoption, or coordination with utilities. If there's a benefit to the utility to do some things like that, I think can be a benefit to both sides of the table.
Yeah, Josh, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely think it could have value to the utility with properly designed time of use rates. And one of the issues with a lot of our investor-owned utilities now have a monthly true-up in the net metering policy, and whatever. And even if you were to be on a time of use rate with them, with your own generation capacity, the fact that it's trued up and at the end of the month, and there is no distinction between on and off peak use during that period, doesn't allow for a storage system to provide any potential value there. So you would really need rate redesign or a different net metering policy to make that work, I think.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's occurred to me that, you know, one of the ideas, and I know that, you know, the typical process is for an investor-owned utility to come forward with a program or a pilot program in a general rate case or something like that. We've seen in other states, in the Northeast specifically, where the commissions have said, we want to be able to move, we want to be able to encourage pilots, but we want to encourage the market and unlocking this and unlocking all of the benefits. So before you come to us with a program or with an idea, we're far enough down the road now where there's experience from businesses out in the field, that you go to a stakeholder group first, right? That the utilities are encouraged and have to have conversations with the industry and then propose some ideas to be able to figure out, you know, if there's ways that we can move forward in the state. And so, you know, that's just an idea to throw out to the full group here too, as we think about, are there ways to learn from all of the customers you have and what those barriers are? How do we make sure we bring that forward so we know what problems we're trying to address, right? And what benefits we're trying to unlock, and do it together, because that's what it's going to take. Who wants to go back to permitting for a second? Or Josh, do you have one more thing on storage?
Go ahead.
So just before I leave this on soft costs, because I think this, you know, we talked about interconnection, the interconnection process is starting. There's, you know, certainly opportunities to make sure there's a set fee for interconnection. There's an ombudsman for a stakeholder process for larger systems. If there's complaints, if there's issues, you know, I think there's a lot of opportunities on that side. On the permitting side of things, I think that's another piece where we don't realize how much time and energy your staff probably spend on permitting and inspections. And I'm wondering if you see an opportunity to improve that through improved permitting processes. I know in the past, Wisconsin communities have been a part of the streamlining processes and trying to improve permitting. We now have Solar App, which is a national effort supported by the Department of Energy and the National Renewable Energy Lab, but wondering how could that benefit your businesses and your customers?
I guess I can touch on that. As many utility companies as there are in the state of Wisconsin, there are exponentially more municipalities in the state of Wisconsin. That is the AHJ, or the authority having jurisdiction. That's where we need to go as designers and installers to figure out what type of permit, if any, they require, what information needs to be submitted for that permit, what the zoning codes, if any, are. There are a lot of municipalities in the state of Wisconsin, and they're all different. Some of them have, you know, vast experience and developed very robust, user-friendly zoning codes, you know, and very clear and concise permitting procedures. Others, it's a crapshoot. You know, I've called a few municipalities, and you know, they don't even know what a solar system is. And, you know, well, what are you trying to do? Well, we're going to put this solar system on this customer's house. Well, why are you putting it on the house? And it's like, you know, they end up almost becoming a customer, because we have to teach them all about solar, how it works, why it works. And at the end of the, you know, conversation, it's, yeah, we just permit new home construction. You can remodel, and we don't need permits for that. So I've spent as little as, you know, I've done projects where there's no permit required by the authority having jurisdiction. I've also been involved in projects where, you know, a 20 kW commercial system costs, you know, $5,000 for a permit. So it's all across the board. I think some form of standardizing. I don't think that putting this on the state of Wisconsin, as far as the state inspectors go, is the answer. They are overworked as it is right now. I do think this can fall on the individual municipalities or even at the county level, but something that's consistent and standard, whether it's a dollar, a fixed fee per watt or a fixed fee per panel. I think there's a way to make that work. It's just like we're trying to do with interconnection standards, get both sides of the group together to sit down and have that conversation and find a way to make it work. But that can be a wildly unknown soft cost to a project. It really can have an impact on the cost of a project for a customer.
Josh, how's your experience?
I don't have much to add to that. I agree with everything that Jesse has said, and maybe it's because we are in a more rural part of the state and country and have maybe more relaxed inspectors and permitting authorities. We don't seem to have a lot of trouble with this.
Are you saying it's not the same as like a city of
It's not
Chicago process?
Yeah. The one thing I would mention is there are municipalities or authorities or jurisdictions that have conditional use permits where you actually have to show up and to a meeting and have it approved, even though they know they can't prevent it from going ahead because of state law. They still require that, which is mostly just an annoyance and a time eater, some Tuesday evening at the local village hall.
I've been there. Yep. Well, great. That's awesome. And I see Russell added to the comments as well. Permitting is fun. I like to say we're changing the world through better permitting. That's my mantra for 2021. Before we move off of soft costs, one question for you, Josh and Jesse, is which Wisconsin utilities are good role models that we've seen in the for most favorable structures for a return on investment for homeowners? As far as, and maybe we can keep it connected to the interconnection standards, like which ones have been the best to work with, or ones that we should look at, would be ones that we could use as a good role model.
It's like asking which natural disaster is your favorite. It just doesn't work that way. I think there's different utilities that, become role models in different parts of this bigger equation. Wisconsin Public Service, I think, is a good role model in terms of a timeliness of a turnaround with applications. They're very quick. It's a very streamlined process. They're super easy to work with, very friendly, communicative, easy to talk to. So I think the role models there. That was one of the utilities where Josh had kind of alluded to, DC capacity versus AC capacity. They've changed, and it looks like they might be changing back. But I think they're a role model in that interconnection process. Alliant Energy, if you would have asked me this question a year and a half ago, Alliant Energy with the Power Clerk online e-based interconnection application software was really nice when it first came out. I think they became overwhelmed with it, and now it is taking forever to run things through Alliant Energy. Some of your small co-ops and WPPI utility members some of them are very easy to work with, very clear, concise, good, simple interconnection processes. So I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think there's any single one that's the absolute forefront as far as role models go, but I think we can pick, the positives from a handful of them and combine them into, one good opportunity.
Hopefully that's what this process can pull out, right? What are the good things from that's been happening in the state that we can replicate and make sure it's consistent, but also, quite honestly, we should learn from other states. Illinois has gone through their in updating their interconnection process, and so I think we could pull some experiences from other states as well. Josh, were you going to add anything else?
I think Jesse nailed it on WPS being very easy to work with, when you can actually reach the right person to talk to who knows what's going on with your own phone. That's really helpful. And Alliant used to be like that, and now that they've gone to a more centralized process, it's a little more opaque and hard to get access to those people or find out where you are in the process. We Energies, I think can be a little more difficult sometimes, and we have not worked with MG&E for years, so I don't know how that's going down there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. One of the, before we move to like what's going to move the market, I want to go back to what you both have experienced in your businesses. One of the questions that's come in is about your workers, your employees, and your needs for employees. How are you how are you finding them? Are you having difficulty finding the installers, the folks who can have the kitchen table conversations, and what's hardest to find? Are there things that you are looking for to expand, the opportunities there for the workforce?
We have a very hard time hiring licensed electricians. I'll say that. And I think there's generally probably just a shortage of them in the state, maybe more broadly now. But yeah, that's been challenging for us. And I think Jesse probably has his own internal program where he can groom people. And that's something that we're looking at getting into now, just because I don't see any other way. But generally speaking, there's a lot of interest in working in solar, so we don't have a hard time hiring general field laborers or project managers or any other easier to find role, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Jesse, how about your experience?
As an electrical contractor, we probably see less of an issue with the electricians. What we look for when we employ, when we hire, is electricians. Eland Electric is not just a solar installer. We do commercial, industrial, residential electrical work. So we kind of have that opportunity to bring them in as electricians and groom them, and they can work on a solar job if they want to. They can go work on a commercial job if they don't. Not that that's a better way to do things than what Josh is doing. I'm not saying that at all. So we have less of an issue getting electricians to come work for us, where in a bigger sense, just construction labor in general, getting people to come work. A lot of people want to apply. Can they show up on time? Can they work 8 hours a day? And can they have a good attitude and put in the effort? Attitude and effort. So I tell my kids all the time, 2 things you can control is attitude and effort. You don't put in the effort, you got a crappy attitude, you're not going to go anywhere. And we find those that come in and have a good attitude, and I'll teach anybody to be an electrician. We can teach anybody to do anything if they have the right attitude and they put in the effort. But that's where we see challenges is with, and not just younger generations, that age spectrum is all over the place as far as just, I don't want to say entitled, but thinking that I can show up at 7:30 when I'm supposed to be here at 7. And the other kind of misnomer, I think, with people who get interested in solar is that, oh yeah, I get to work in the sunshine, I get to be up on a roof, and it's just like being in Florida. It's not. Asphalt shingles in Wisconsin in the summer are 130 degrees. They'll burn your kneecaps off. We put in a solar system yesterday, so we're outside when it's below 0. We're outside when it's 110. It's physical work. It's good work. But yeah, there's a construction shortage all over the board, not just in solar, not just in electrical work, but all over the place. And I think we'll get there. There's some good programs out there. I saw Madison has a trainee program or a kind of a pre-apprenticeship program for solar installers. So being able to evolve around the situations, it's what the construction industry does best. So.
Excellent. Thank you too so much for that insight. That's really helpful. Yeah, it looks like someone just posted about the UW Platteville program as well. Feel free if folks are on and you have programs you want to share in the chat, that's great. Feel free to do that. Any other thoughts on that? Otherwise, I do want to turn to what customers and what residents and businesses in Wisconsin are looking for. All right. So oh, go ahead, Josh.
No, I just said, go ahead.
Okay. So what do you think is the best way to expand distributed generation solutions, right? How are we going to increase access? Things have been going well. We've seen an increased interest, but we have so much opportunity and such a benefit to bring to the overall grid by expanding access to distributed solar. on the customer side, whether it is a homeowner, whether it is a business or a school. What have you found that's been helpful to tap into for financing, and what are the barriers that your customers have run into that have been a real blocker that in your mind, this is what Wisconsin should be addressing next? You can start with the good things if you want, and then recommendations. Those both 2 questions at the same time.
Well, I think there's a lot of optimistic things happening right now with at the Public Service Commission, and primarily, and with what Renew is doing on their advocacy work. There's the potential that the focus on energy budget will be, I think, up to doubled. Is that what's getting put into the governor's budget? We definitely could use more focus funding in general. It's running short, and be able to increase incentives, making them more meaningful again, and including those for solar plus storage systems. I think a lot of the talk around rate redesign and valuing solar and storage more appropriately on the grid would be incredibly helpful. The interconnection process is coming. That'll be great. Maybe we can start a state-run green bank, help with that financing piece.
Very nice. And I know we're running short, so I don't mean to cut you off, Josh. I want to give Jesse just like 30 seconds. What's your top list of what we could do?
On the
That'd be
residential
helpful.
side, rate redesign can really increase the value of solar to a customer, making it more attractive, I guess, for them to move forward with it. On the commercial side, Ken, in that initial slide that he had, the one thing that all 3 of those rooftops that he pointed to, 1,500 rooftops in the state of Wisconsin, they're all nonprofits. Finding a way for nonprofits to either take advantage of some privatized funding or some creative way for tax incentives or funding incentives, but there's a lot of nonprofits in the state of Wisconsin, and they have a lot of roof space. Those are the 2, I guess, my 2 top ones that I would say.
Excellent. You guys are great. Jesse and Josh, thank you so much for being on the panel this afternoon. Thanks everybody. And thanks to Ken and Madison College for sponsoring the session. Thank you all for joining us. I want to thank the full Renew team for pulling this summit together. Sam, I know we're like out of time, but I know, and colleagues, like we all would have seen each other over this week and we didn't really get to do that. But Renew did an awesome job pulling this together, and we're able to share as much as possible. So thanks to Bravo to Renew for pulling this together during challenging times. So Sam, I'll turn it to you for closing comments.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. That was so nice. And thank you to everyone for attending our 10th annual Renewable Energy Summit. We're so happy to have you here. We really enjoyed connecting with all of you over the last few days. Thank you so much again to our sponsors as well, especially our presenting sponsors, Arch Electric, Green Penny, and Invenergy. Also, thank you to all of our amazing and talented speakers and panelists. We hope to be connecting with you in person for our next summit, certainly, and we still love your feedback on our virtual event as well. We'll be emailing you an evaluation tomorrow. Please let us know if we did well and how we can improve in the future. And we're certainly grateful to you for spending your time with us. And thank you for all of you do to advance renewable energy in Wisconsin. And thank you again.
Thanks, folks. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks to
Sure,
all the
everybody.
speakers. You guys did a great job, and thanks to Renew for the event.